A knock on his door. It was a Thursday evening when Daniel Carter heard the knock. The sun had barely dipped beneath the horizon, casting a golden glow over his porch, and the breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass. Daniel, a 52-year-old mechanic with a quiet life, had just sat down with a cup of black coffee when the sound broke the silence. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he found a social worker standing there, clutching a thin folder and holding the hand of a small girl with eyes too wide and tired for her age. "This is Lena," the woman said softly. "She needs a temporary home." Daniel blinked. He had signed up for emergency foster care nearly a year ago, on a whim, after reading an article about the shortage of foster families in his county. He'd gone through the training, passed the background checks, filled out the forms, but no one had ever called. "Not until now." "Just a few days," the woman said. "We're still locating extended family." Daniel hesitated. He had never been a father. Never even married. His life had been one long stretch of working on engines, feeding stray cats, and spending weekends fixing things that didn't really need fixing. He looked down at the girl. She was maybe 8 years old. Hair messy, shoes worn thin, and holding onto a small stuffed bunny so tightly its ears were flattened. She didn't speak. Didn't even look at him directly. But her fingers clutched the bunny with the kind of desperation Daniel had only seen in soldiers returning from war. He stepped aside. "Come on in." The first night was quiet. Lena didn't say a word. She sat on the edge of the bed in the spare room, bunny in her lap, staring at the floor. Daniel brought her a peanut butter sandwich and a glass of milk. She didn't touch it. He left the door cracked open and turned on the hallway light, just in case. In the middle of the night, he heard her cry. Soft. Barely audible. Like she was trying to keep it inside. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, unsure what to do. He had rebuilt engines with his eyes closed, survived 2 decades of hard labor, and watched friends bury their children. But nothing in his life prepared him for the sound of a child quietly breaking in the room next door. He sat in the hallway, leaning against the wall outside her door, and stayed there until her sobs faded into sleep. The next few days passed slowly. Lena said little, barely more than a nod or shrug. But she started eating. She started leaving her room for short moments. She even sat with Daniel on the porch one afternoon, watching the birds fight over the feeder. "She's been through a lot," the social worker told him on the phone. Her mother went missing 3 weeks ago. No father in the picture. Police are still investigating. Daniel didn't ask for more. The file said enough: neglect, inconsistent schooling, possible signs of abuse. Lena had lived in 3 different homes in the past year. This wasn't her first time being placed with a stranger. But it was different for Daniel. He found himself watching her when she wasn't looking, how carefully she moved, like she was trying not to disturb the air around her. How she flinched when he accidentally dropped a wrench. How she always scanned the room before sitting, like checking for escape routes. One evening, he brought home a small box of crayons and a sketch pad. Left it on the kitchen table. The next morning, he found a drawing of the stuffed bunny. 2 weeks passed. No word from the authorities. No family stepping forward. The social worker began mentioning longer-term options. "It's still early," she said. "But we may need to consider keeping her here for a few months." Daniel nodded. He didn't say what he was thinking, that he'd already rearranged his work schedule to be home earlier. That he had started cooking real meals instead of microwave dinners. That he'd learned how to braid hair using YouTube tutorials, just in case. That the silence in his house wasn't so heavy anymore. One night, while watching a cartoon together, Lena fell asleep with her head on his arm. Daniel didn't move for over an hour, afraid to break the moment. She was still so guarded, but she had begun saying small things, "Thank you," when he made her hot chocolate. "Good night," when he tucked her in. She even smiled once, just a flicker, when a squirrel tried to jump into the bird feeder and fell off dramatically. Daniel cherished that smile like a winning lottery ticket. Then one day, Lena asked a question that froze him in place. "Do you think my mom is coming back?" They were sitting at the kitchen table, working on a puzzle. It was the first time she had spoken more than 2 words at once. Daniel swallowed. He had no answers. The truth was tangled and dark, and her little heart didn't deserve it. "I hope so," he said gently. "But no matter what happens, I'm here for you. Okay?" She looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were large and brown, filled with more pain than a child should ever carry. Then she nodded. And placed one of the puzzle pieces in the corner. That night, she gave him the bunny. She didn't say anything. Just walked into the living room, placed the stuffed toy on his lap, and climbed into his arms. Daniel held her tightly, not saying a word, as tears slid down his face. Something had changed. This wasn't just temporary anymore. Not for him. Maybe not for her either. He knew then that if they asked him to keep her longer, months, a year, maybe more, he wouldn't hesitate. What he didn't know was that the journey they had just begun would lead to something far deeper than either of them expected. Something life-changing. Something that would one day bring them to a courtroom. And leave everyone there in tears. The pieces come together. There was something about routine that comforted Lena. By the 3rd week, mornings in Daniel's house followed a quiet rhythm. She would wake to the smell of eggs or toast he always made too much and tiptoe into the kitchen, her bunny trailing behind her. Daniel would already be there, dressed in grease-stained work clothes, reading the local newspaper with an intensity that made him look far older than his years. They didn't speak much, but slowly, like tiny cracks letting in light, conversations began to form. "Do you like cars?" he asked one day, motioning to a toy-sized engine he'd placed on the table. Lena had shrugged. "I used to help my dad with the tires," she said softly, and that was the first real thing she shared about her past. Daniel didn't push. He only nodded and handed her a wrench. "Want to see the real thing?" Down in the garage, Lena watched as Daniel moved through the maze of metal, tools, and motor oil like a conductor leading a symphony. There was something oddly beautiful in the way his hands worked, in how he explained things without talking down to her. He showed her how to check oil levels and change a spark plug. She giggled when her fingers got greasy. It was the first time he heard her laugh. Daniel felt something stir in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in years. Not quite fatherhood, he didn't dare call it that yet, but something warm and fiercely protective. And in Lena's eyes, for the first time, there was a spark that wasn't dulled by fear. That night, Daniel opened the thin manila folder the social worker had left behind. He hadn't looked at it closely before. He told himself it was because he didn't want to judge Lena based on paperwork. But deep down, he knew the truth, he was afraid of what he'd find. The report was brief but brutal. Lena had been living with her mother, Kayla Reynolds, a single mom who bounced between jobs and boyfriends. There were multiple calls to child services, domestic disturbances, school absences, signs of neglect. No proof of direct abuse, but it didn't take much imagination to read between the lines. 3 weeks ago, Kayla vanished. Neighbors claimed she left in the middle of the night. One said they heard shouting. Another mentioned seeing a man with a black pickup truck around the same time. Police were investigating. But there was no body. No clues. No answers. And that meant Lena was stuck in limbo. Daniel closed the file and stared out the window. He had always believed life should be simple: work hard, stay honest, fix what's broken. But this wasn't a broken carburetor. This was a little girl with no anchor. No certainty. No one. Except, maybe, him. The days became weeks. Every afternoon, Daniel picked Lena up from school. She started leaving drawings for him on the fridge: cars with smiley faces, stick figures holding hands, a house with a crooked chimney labeled home. She wasn't calling him Dad. But she was calling this place home. And somehow, that meant more. One day, she handed him a folded piece of paper. "Miss Taylor at school said to write about someone who makes us feel safe." Daniel unfolded it and read. "He fixes things. Even when they don't make noise or move. He makes me pancakes when I'm sad. He lets me hold the flashlight even when I mess up. I think he's my best grown-up. I think he might be my real family. He didn't cry, not then. He simply folded the note, slid it into his wallet behind a photo of his late mother, and told her they could get ice cream before dinner. She chose strawberry with gummy bears. He chose vanilla. And they sat together on the tailgate of his truck, watching the sun dip below the horizon like it was just another normal day. But it wasn't. Daniel knew something had changed. She wasn't a guest anymore. She was his. One stormy Sunday, Lena woke screaming. Daniel bolted from his room, heart pounding, and found her curled in the corner of her bed, fists clenched, sobbing into her bunny. She took me, she cried. She said he was coming back. She said he was mad, he was so mad. It took nearly an hour to calm her down. She didn't explain more, just clung to him, whispering, "Don't let him find me," over and over. Daniel held her until she fell asleep, and even then, he didn't let go. The next morning, he called the social worker. "I want to file for permanent guardianship," he said firmly. There was a pause on the other end. "Daniel, that's a big step." "I know. I'm not backing down. You understand that it means court hearings, home inspections, psychological evaluations. I don't care what it takes." The social worker sighed, but there was a softness in her voice when she finally said, "All right. I'll start the paperwork." Weeks turned into months. The home was inspected. Daniel was evaluated by a counselor. Lena was interviewed by court officials and child advocates. Every step was invasive, exhausting, and filled with doubt. But Daniel never wavered. He fixed up the spare bedroom, turned it pink and lavender, added fairy lights and bookshelves. Lena chose a new comforter with dinosaurs and glitter. "Girls can like both," she insisted, and Daniel laughed. She started calling him D. Then Mr. Daniel. Then one morning, quietly, she said, "Daddy." He pretended not to react. Just gave her a warm "good morning, sweetheart," and went back to flipping pancakes. But in the garage later, he cried behind the tool bench. Then, the day arrived. Daniel pressed his best suit. Lena wore a blue dress and white shoes. The courthouse was large and gray, with cold floors and echoing hallways. Daniel hated the place instantly. Lena gripped his hand the whole time. The judge, a woman named Thompson, reviewed the documents, asked a few questions, and glanced at Lena kindly. "Is there anything you'd like to say, young lady?" Lena hesitated. Then stood up. What she said next would leave everyone in that courtroom speechless. But that is for another day. The stand she took. The courtroom was painfully quiet. Lena's fingers gripped Daniel's hand like it was her only anchor in a sea of marble floors and unfamiliar faces. Judge Thompson sat on a tall bench, her expression unreadable but kind. She had Lena's file in front of her, a collection of facts, statements, and timelines that attempted to explain a little girl's entire life in 20 printed pages. But no file could explain the bond that had formed between Lena and Daniel. It was something deeper. Something real. "Would you like to say anything before I make my ruling, Lena?" the judge asked again, her voice gentle. Daniel began to rise from his seat, thinking to protect her, to say she didn't have to if she didn't want to. But Lena held his arm down. "I want to," she whispered. So Daniel sat. And the room waited. Lena walked to the small wooden podium, her dress brushing against her white shoes, her shoulders too small for the weight she was carrying. She looked up at the judge. Then over at the social worker. Then, finally, at Daniel. "I want to tell you about Mr. Daniel," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I used to live with my mom. She was, sometimes nice. Sometimes scary. I didn't know which one she'd be when I woke up. She had a lot of boyfriends, and they didn't like me. One of them," she paused, her throat tightening, "he yelled a lot. And one time, he locked me in the closet when I cried because I was hungry." Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel had never heard this part. "I didn't tell anyone. I was scared they'd take me away. But then one day, my mom said we had to leave. We packed in the middle of the night. She said if I made noise, he'd follow us. I didn't even get to take my bunny. We stayed in a friend's apartment, but then Mom left and didn't come back. A tear ran down Lena's cheek. She never came back. The silence was heavy now, like the air itself had thickened. The police found me 3 days later. I was hiding under the bed. I didn't want them to take me. I thought they'd hurt me too. Her hands were shaking now. But she didn't stop. Then they brought me to a house. Mr. Daniel's house. He didn't say much. Just made me a sandwich. He left the light on when I slept. He gave me crayons and a sketch pad. And he didn't ask me to talk until I was ready. She looked at Daniel again. Her voice cracked. He fixed me. Daniel pressed his fist to his mouth. Lena turned back to the judge. I didn't know what it meant to feel safe. Or what it felt like when someone waited for you at school. Or tucked you in. Or made pancakes when you had a bad dream. She pulled something from her pocket. It was a folded drawing. She opened it and held it up. It showed 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing in front of a house with a big sun over it. The small figure held a wrench, and the big one had a bunny in his hand. I drew this the day I realized I wanted him to be my real dad. Not a maybe dad. Not a kind of dad. A forever dad. The courtroom was silent. A few people were crying openly now. One of the child advocates dabbed her eyes behind her clipboard. Lena looked directly at the judge. Please let me stay. Not just for now. Forever. I don't want to pack bags anymore. I want to stay where my bunny lives. Where pancakes smell like Saturday. Where I get to be a kid. She took a breath. Where I get to be loved. The room exploded into quiet tears. Daniel couldn't breathe. His eyes blurred with tears, but he didn't try to hide them. Judge Thompson stared at Lena for a long moment, then slowly nodded. You may return to your seat, sweetheart. As Lena walked back, Daniel stood and bent down to hug her. She whispered in his ear, "Did I do okay?" He couldn't speak. Just kissed the top of her head. The judge shuffled the papers in front of her, clearly trying to gather herself. In all my years on the bench, she said, her voice thick, I have read hundreds of reports, reviewed countless evaluations, and heard many adoption cases. But some stories, they go beyond paperwork. She looked directly at Daniel. Mr. Carter, your devotion, patience, and love have provided this child with something no system can guarantee, a home where she is wanted, safe, and deeply cared for. Daniel swallowed hard. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that Lena Rose Reynolds shall hereby be adopted by Mr. Daniel Carter. Her new legal name will be Lena Rose Carter. There was applause from the gallery, quiet, respectful, but filled with emotion. Daniel turned to Lena, who was crying now, wiping her face with the sleeve of her dress. You okay, kiddo? He asked. She nodded. I have a real name now. With you in it. The adoption was finalized that afternoon. The court staff took photos. Lena clung to Daniel, never once letting go of his hand. On their way out, Judge Thompson stopped them at the door. She's very special, she said. So are you. Daniel nodded. She saved me too. That night, at home, Lena insisted on baking a cake. I've never celebrated a birthday that was about me, she explained. So I want to celebrate our family birthday. They used a store-bought mix. Burned the first layer. Overfrosted the second. The kitchen looked like a sugar-covered war zone by the time they were done. Daniel took one bite and smiled. Tastes like family. He tucked her in that night, just like every night. But this time, Lena looked up at him and whispered, Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think my real dad would have wanted me? Daniel sat beside her and took her hand. I don't know your real dad, sweetheart. But I know I want you. Every single day. Lena smiled. Then maybe you're more real than he ever was. Daniel felt something inside him break and heal at the same time. He stayed there with her until she fell asleep. The truth about her past. The adoption was official. The papers were signed, the judge had spoken, and the courtroom that once loomed with uncertainty now felt like the place where a new life had begun. Daniel Carter was no longer a guardian, a foster parent, or a stopgap solution. He was Lena's father. Legally. Permanently. Unquestionably. The moment they walked out of the courthouse, hand in hand, the world seemed quieter, safer. The sky was a little bluer, and Lena's laughter rang out like a song in Daniel's ears as she twirled on the sidewalk in her white shoes. But sometimes, even in the most beautiful stories, shadows return. 3 weeks after the adoption, a letter arrived in the mail. It wasn't addressed to Lena or Daniel specifically, just a standard white envelope marked State of Illinois, Department of Family and Children's Services. Daniel almost tossed it, assuming it was a routine notice. But when he opened it, his stomach dropped. The letter informed him that Kayla Reynolds, Lena's biological mother, had been found alive. Living under an alias in a women's shelter on the edge of Chicago. She'd turned herself in, citing guilt and remorse. She wanted to speak with her daughter. Daniel stared at the letter for a long time, the words swimming before him. 4 months, Kayla had been a ghost, a painful silhouette in Lena's memory. And now, she was back. Why now? Why, after the adoption had been finalized? He placed the letter down slowly, knowing one truth. He couldn't keep this from Lena. That night, over a quiet dinner of mac and cheese and broccoli trees, Lena's favorite, Daniel gently brought it up. "There's something I need to tell you, kiddo," he said softly, watching her face. Lena blinked, curious. "What is it?" He took a breath. "Your mom, they found her. She's alive." Lena's fork froze midair. Her face didn't move, but her body tensed. "She's in a shelter. She says she wants to talk to you." "Just talk." For a few moments, Lena said nothing. Then she asked, "Is she okay?" Daniel hesitated. "I think she's trying to be. I don't know much yet." Lena pushed her food aside. "Do I have to see her?" "No," he said instantly. "You don't have to do anything. You're my daughter. No one can make you." Lena looked down at her lap. "I used to dream she'd come back. That she'd say sorry. That we'd go get ice cream or something." She paused. "But now that she has come back, I don't know if I want her to." Daniel nodded, giving her the space to process. "You can take your time," he said. "We don't have to decide anything right now." But something had shifted. And over the next few days, Lena began asking questions. What did the letter say exactly? Did she say she was sorry? Was she looking for me this whole time? Daniel answered as honestly as he could, but every response seemed to deepen the fog in Lena's mind. Finally, one morning, she said it. "I think I want to see her. Just once. Just to ask why." The shelter was in a quiet part of the city, a converted church with tall windows and soft beige walls. Daniel held Lena's hand tightly as they walked in. The receptionist smiled kindly, recognizing them. "She's waiting in the garden out back." Daniel offered to stay inside, but Lena said, "No. I want you there." The garden was simple roses and a small fountain in the center. And sitting on the bench, thinner than Daniel remembered from the photos in the case file, was Kayla Reynolds. She stood when she saw Lena. Her face crumpled. "My baby," she whispered, her arms half raised like she wasn't sure she had the right. Lena stopped a few feet away. Daniel stayed by her side. Kayla's eyes were sunken, haunted. She looked at Daniel and gave a shaky nod. "Thank you. For all of it." Then her gaze went to Lena. "I didn't come to take you back. I know I lost that right. I just wanted you to know I didn't die. I didn't forget you." Lena's jaw tightened. Then why did you leave? Kayla swallowed. Because I was drowning. And I was too broken to save anyone, not even you. I was 5, Lena said, her voice sharper than usual. You packed a bag, said to stay quiet, and disappeared. Tears streamed down Kayla's face. I was scared. He was dangerous, Lena. He hit me. He threatened you. He said if I ran, he'd find us both and kill us. I thought if I left, he'd follow me and forget about you. You left me alone. I know, Kayla choked. I know what I did. And I can never take it back. Lena's hands balled into fists. I cried every night for you. I thought it was my fault. I thought I wasn't enough. You were always enough, Kayla said, stepping forward slightly. I was the one who wasn't. Daniel could feel Lena shaking beside him. He knelt to her level. You can say whatever you need to say. Or we can go, he whispered. Lena looked up at her mother, the woman who had given her life, then vanished from it. You're not my mom anymore, she said, voice breaking. But I hope you get better. I hope you don't hurt anyone else. And I hope you find peace. Kayla collapsed onto the bench in sobs. Lena turned away, burying her face in Daniel's chest. They left the garden without looking back. In the car ride home, Lena was quiet. Not crying, just thoughtful. Do you hate her? She asked suddenly. Daniel blinked. No. I don't hate her. I hate what happened to you. But I think she was lost. And some people don't find their way back until it's too late. Lena nodded slowly. Am I allowed to still miss her? Daniel reached over and held her hand. You're allowed to feel anything you want. Missing someone doesn't mean you want them back. It just means they mattered once. Lena rested her head on the window and whispered, I'm glad you're my dad now. Daniel's throat tightened. Me too, kiddo. Me too. Back home, things began to feel normal again, or as normal as they could be after confronting the ghosts of the past. Lena started drawing again. More color. More warmth. She drew one picture of Daniel with a cape, labeled Super Dad. Daniel hung it above the kitchen sink. Every time he saw it, he remembered that strength wasn't about fixing things. It was about showing up. Staying. Loving. And now, for the first time, Lena could start healing, not in fear, but in the light of the truth. Because the past didn't own her anymore. A letter for the future. Time has a funny way of turning quiet moments into lifelong memories. It had been 4 years since Lena's adoption was finalized, 4 years since she stood in that courtroom, voice trembling, telling the world that Daniel Carter was the only father she'd ever known. Now, Lena was 15. Taller. Sharper. Her shy nature had grown into a quiet confidence. She still wore her emotions like a coat close to the chest, but the girl who once spoke only in whispers had become a young woman with a voice of her own. Daniel, on the other hand, had aged in a way only single fathers of teenagers truly understand. The dark in his beard had faded. He now had a collection of dad mugs, socks that didn't match, and the permanent ability to sense when Lena was lying about finishing her homework. But he wouldn't trade any of it. Not for a second. They had built a life together, a simple, beautiful rhythm that revolved around trust, laughter, and two beating hearts that had once been shattered by others, now healed in each other. And yet, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. It started on a Thursday. Daniel came home from work, tossing his keys into the ceramic bowl Lena made in her 8th grade art class. He expected to hear music blasting upstairs or Lena yelling, "There's no food in this house," like she always did even when the fridge was full. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. He walked into the kitchen and found a sealed envelope taped to the fridge. "Read this alone, love, Lena." His heart skipped. He slowly opened it, not knowing what to expect, maybe a heartfelt birthday card or a secret confession about that dent in the car's bumper she swore was there when she found it. But what he found inside was something entirely different. It wasn't a birthday note. It wasn't a confession. It was a letter. And as Daniel began to read it, the world seemed to fall away. Dear Dad. If you're reading this, don't panic. I'm okay. No hospital visits. No school suspensions. This isn't that kind of letter. I'm writing this because I realized something today, something I've felt for a long time but never said out loud. You saved my life. Not the way you might think. Not with sirens or bandages or heroic leaps. You saved me with pancakes. With warm socks on cold mornings. With how was school, when no one else ever asked. With bedtime stories, even when I pretended I was too old to want them. You saved me by staying. People always talk about the heroes who show up when things go wrong. But they never talk about the ones who stay long after the fire is out. The ones who sit with you in the ashes and say, we'll build something new here. You did that for me. Every single day. I remember the first time I called you Dad. I pretended it slipped out. But it didn't. I'd been practicing. Because I needed to be sure. And you made it so easy to be sure. I've never forgotten what you told me that night. You said, being a dad isn't about who made you. It's about who stayed to love you. That sentence changed my life. And here's the part I've never told you. I was writing this letter for years. Little by little. After school. On birthdays. On the anniversary of the court date. Every time I thought of something I was too scared to say in person, I wrote it down. Like the time you helped me make that volcano for science class and pretended to be a geologist. Or when I had my first real breakdown in middle school and you sat outside my door, reading Winnie the Pooh quotes until I cracked a smile. Or when I had a dream about my mom and woke up crying, and you just held me, not asking questions, just being there. Every one of those moments, you were the anchor. And now. I'm 15. I'm applying for a mentorship program. They asked me to write about someone who changed my life. I chose you. I want you to read the letter before I submit it. Daniel paused. His hands trembled. His eyes blurred with tears. There was a second sheet, folded underneath the first. It was the mentorship letter. To the Mentorship Selection Committee. When I was 5, I thought love was something you had to earn. That if you cried too much or got in the way, it would disappear. Then I met Daniel Carter. He wasn't trying to be my father. He didn't wear a cape or quote wisdom or try to fix everything with money. He just listened. He showed up at every soccer game, even when I was benched. He came to parent-teacher conferences. He made me grilled cheese after bad days. He kept all my drawings, even the ugly ones. I don't know what it's like to have a birth father who loves you. But I do know what it's like to have a dad who chooses you. Every day. Without question. And that kind of love, the kind that stays, is what changed my life. I want to be that for someone else. I want a mentor because I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong. And I know what it's like to finally find someone who says, you do. Thank you for reading. Sincerely. Lena Rose Carter. Daniel set the letter down, overwhelmed. There are moments in life that hit harder than any storm. Moments that remind you why you keep going, why you keep choosing love even when it's hard. This was one of those moments. She had written every word without telling him. She had seen him. Truly. And now, he saw her in a whole new light, not just as the little girl he took in, but as a young woman who understood more about love and resilience than most adults ever would. That evening, Daniel found her in her room, headphones in, sketching something in her journal. He sat on the edge of her bed. I read it, he said quietly. Lena didn't look up right away, but when she did, her eyes were wet. You're not mad? Mad? Daniel laughed through a sniffle. That was the best letter I've ever read. And not just because it was about me. She smiled softly. He reached over and took her hand. You're the reason I believe in second chances. In healing. In purpose. Lena tilted her head. I thought I was the one being saved. Daniel shook his head. No, sweetheart. We saved each other. Later that night, they sat on the porch with mugs of hot cocoa, the sky painted in fading hues of orange and blue. I want to give back, Lena said. I want to be there for someone else the way you were there for me. Daniel nodded. Then do it. You have more to offer than you know. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I hope one day, when I'm old, I'll be like you. Daniel chuckled. You mean grumpy and gray? No, she said, someone who stays. What she said in court. The courtroom hadn't changed much. Same brown benches, same polished wooden walls, same slightly flickering ceiling light near the exit door. But everything else felt different. Lena stood near the front, taller, older, with the poise of someone who had lived through storms and come out stronger. She was 17 now. Gone was the girl who once clutched a stuffed rabbit and whispered her testimony into a microphone. Today, Lena stood confidently in a navy blue dress, her hair pulled back neatly, and a soft strength in her eyes that Daniel recognized as the beautiful product of years of healing. Daniel sat just a few feet away, watching her from the gallery. But this wasn't her adoption day. This day belonged to someone else. Her name was Mia. She was 9 years old, small for her age, with oversized glasses and a cautious demeanor. She had been in and out of homes for most of her life. 3 different schools in 1 year. Her records were scattered, her trust fractured. Daniel had met her during one of his community volunteering stints through Lena's mentorship program. He'd been donating books to a children's shelter when he noticed her always reading, always watching. Quiet but curious. She reminded him of Lena. Weeks passed, and Daniel found himself visiting more often, staying longer. Reading with Mia, talking with her, helping her with homework. And when Mia was asked where she wanted to go next, she whispered, "Can I go where Mr. Daniel is?" The Carter home was suddenly filled with the sounds of a child again. Laughter in the halls, puzzle pieces on the floor, random stickers on the furniture. Lena, thrilled by Mia's presence, instantly took on the role of older sister. It was chaotic. It was noisy. It was perfect. And so, Daniel did what he always did when life brought someone into his path who needed love. He chose them. He filed for adoption. And today, 3 months later, they were in court to make it official. Would the next witness please step forward, the judge said, his tone gentle, as if he understood the weight of this day. Lena rose. She hadn't planned on speaking, at least not officially, but the night before, she'd handed Daniel a folded piece of paper and said, "I think I want to say something." Now she stood, paper in hand, voice steady as she looked toward the bench. "My name is Lena Carter," she began, "and 8 years ago, I stood right where Mia is now." She looked over at Mia, who gave her a shy smile. I was terrified. I was sure I didn't matter. That I wasn't wanted. I thought the world had already given up on me. But then someone showed up. He didn't promise to fix everything. He just stayed. She glanced toward Daniel, who blinked rapidly, doing his best not to cry. Daniel Carter didn't give me life. But he gave me a life. A good one. A safe one. A life where love wasn't earned, it was given freely. Where mistakes didn't end relationships, they just became part of the growing. She paused, breathing slowly. He showed me what family really is. Then, her voice softened as she looked directly at the judge. Today, Mia is about to receive that same gift. Not just a house or a name. But a father who shows up. Every day. Without fail. Someone who will be there for science projects and heartbreaks, for scraped knees and graduation days. Mia smiled at Daniel, her eyes wide with anticipation. Lena folded the paper and placed it on the podium. Some people say foster kids are lucky when they get adopted. But I don't think that's right. I think it's the parents who are lucky. Lucky to be trusted. Lucky to love someone back to life. Her eyes glistened as she finished. Daniel Carter is the reason I believe in second chances. And Mia deserves hers. Please let this adoption go through. I promise you, this man is not just capable of being a father. He already is." The silence that followed was full and sacred. Even the court clerk wiped away a tear. The judge, a seasoned man with silver-rimmed glasses and a weathered expression, nodded slowly. "Thank you, Miss Carter. That was one of the most powerful testimonies I've heard in this courtroom." He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Carter, do you understand the responsibilities of adopting Mia as your legal daughter?" Daniel stood. "I do. With everything I have." "And Mia, sweetheart," the judge said gently, "do you want this man to be your forever dad?" Mia beamed. "Yes. He makes the best waffles." Laughter rippled through the room. And just like that, it was done. The judge signed the papers. The gavel fell. And Mia Carter became a daughter. Back at home, the celebration was small but full of meaning. Balloons with "Welcome Home" hung in the kitchen. Lena had baked a lopsided cake, with the frosting spelling out Carter Girls Club. Daniel cried when he saw it, pulling both girls into a hug so tight they squealed. They danced in socks. They watched Mia's favorite movie 3 times. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel found a quiet moment on the porch to just breathe it all in. Lena joined him, holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "Full circle," she whispered. Daniel smiled. "You did good today." "So did you." They sat in silence for a moment, the stars blinking above. "Do you remember that first night I moved in?" Lena asked. "I remember everything," Daniel said. "I was scared of the dark. You brought me that silly lantern shaped like a duck. It quacked every time you turned it on," he chuckled. "Annoying as anything." "I still have it," she said softly. "In my closet." He looked over, eyes shining. "You've come a long way." "We both have." She hesitated, then added, "When I spoke in court today, I kept thinking about that first time I testified when I said I wanted you to be my dad." Daniel turned toward her, eyes locked. "That was the moment everything changed." Lena smiled. "It changed for me again today. Watching Mia. Seeing her get what I got. I realized I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was giving her the start of hers." Later that night, Daniel tucked Mia into bed. "Can I call you Dad now?" she asked. "You can call me anything you want, sweetheart." Mia smiled. "Good night, Dad." Daniel turned off the light, heart full. When he walked down the hallway, he passed Lena's room. Her door was open slightly, and she was typing on her laptop. "What are you working on?" he asked. "My college application essay," she replied. "Need help?" She grinned. "No. It's about you." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "What did I ever do to deserve you?" Lena looked up, her expression sincere. "You stayed." And with that, the story of a foster child who found a father, of a man who found purpose through parenting, and of 2 lives forever changed by love, came to a close. Not an ending, but a continuation. Because family isn't always about where you start. It's about who stays with you along the way. And sometimes, the most powerful stories are written not in headlines, but in the quiet moments between "I'm here" and "I'm not leaving."